Hello, my name is Jamie Tomey, and I am pleased to welcome you to this week's Evanston Bound Tour with Mardy Sears. We hope you enjoy it. Mardy, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
I am so excited that you're joining us. And what is really funny is that you are joining us from just a few blocks away, right? You're here in Evanston and I'm here in Evanston. So we're Evanston bound in a different way during this tour. So the first question we usually ask is, how did you come to the book arts? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your book arts history?
I came to the book arts as a printmaker, and what a lot of people don't know about me is that when I was in undergrad, I was a textile artist. And I used all of these Nigerian resist dye techniques to make these huge tapestries, like 40 by 80 inch. And one of the things you do when you're for the well, we call them tapestries, we'd put all the under dyes on and build up, and then usually I'd have a final over dye layer that created the image.
Oh,
When I got out of school, I went to the museum school in Boston. I didn't really have the facilities to do this, and so I started with printmaking. I would make block prints at home, and I would do watercolors for the under dyes, and then I would do the block print for the image. And little by little, text started working its way into my block prints to the point where I couldn't really make a print without having at least one word in it.
I love that.
So that led to books. It just was a natural progression.
I love that. So you finished your undergrad and then you had a couple years where you were just making these block prints at home. And then what happened?
I didn't go to grad school for a good 15 years.
Oh,
I didn't think I wanted to go to grad school. I was in Boston. I was tired of my job, and my fairly new boyfriend had moved out to Chicago. And so I came to visit him, and I discovered the Columbia Center for Book and Paper Arts, and I fell in love. And I thought, okay, this is for me. I'm moving out. I hadn't even applied to Columbia yet. I got a part-time job so I could make more art, and I applied, and I went the next year. I started the next year.
So you graduated in 2006, and then what did you do, and how did you come to making ceramics as well as book arts? And I'm so fascinated by that crossover because, as you know, at Vespine we had my husband doing ceramics and Leah and Sean and I doing paper, and it was kind of this whole layering thing that we always work with. They're so similar. So I guess I just asked you like 5 questions in
one. Okay, so the first one, after I graduated, so Bill Drendel was the director when I was there. And when I began at Columbia, he was saying what I wanted to do was getting into book conservation. And he was like, oh, yes, of course we have that. And we're going to have a course taught by this woman who ended up being Barb Corbell at the Art Institute. Well, by the time I got to know Barb, she's like, I was never going to do that. So I signed on for an internship with her my last year at Columbia. And she was at a point where she was just moving to prints and drawings and taking on a new job. And she knew that this guy who worked in the prep shop, who did all the exhibition prep, was going to be leaving on paternity leave and not coming back. So she said, you have to apply for this job. And so I went directly into, within about less than half of a year, I filled in for his paternity leave in the summer, and then by October, after graduating, I had a job as a conservation technician in P&D, and she was there for about a year before
Yeah.
she moved to the Newberry.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So you learn, and is this a job that you just, I know every job has its ups and downs, but is this a job that you just adore because you get to work with all these paper objects and do all
Yeah.
of these things? So tell us more about that.
I feel like, well, I get to see so many great things. I work primarily with the Department of Prints and Drawings, although now I'm part of Conservation and Science. And some modern and contemporary art collection pieces come over to us as well, although there is contemporary and P&D as well. And I make boxes, drop spine boxes and blueboard boxes, and I cut mats and I frame and I unframe and I install exhibitions. And I feel like so many beautiful works crossed my path. And after 13 years of doing it, I really feel like it's kind of internalized. And so I'm kind of hard to please at this point, I think. Like, when I look at art, it takes something really unique to excite me, I think.
Yeah, you are spoiled.
I am.
I love that. I want to have more of a conversation about that with you just personally, because I'm fascinated by the Art Institute and having these works of art just be there and be accessible in this weird way to you and to the conservationists and just even to the public. But let's talk a little bit about your work.
Sure. I'm starting off with about a year ago, I was part of an event with Big Ink. Have you heard of Big Ink?
Big Ink?
I know you've seen the whale that I made.
Yeah.
This
Is that the one where they do a really big print in the middle of the street?
No, it's a couple, and they travel around with a press called the Big Tuna, and you apply. You actually pay a fee, and once you have been accepted, you have a month to carve a block up to, I think, 40 by 96. So
wow.
I went for it, and I carved something, I think it's 40 by 90. Yeah, 40 by 90. It's a big whale. So I start off with the sort of the origins of that. So I started off this year, let's say, go back to last summer. I was getting ready for this Big Ink event where I was making a huge print of a humpback whale. And I had applied for a residency at the Whiteley Center in Friday Harbor Labs out on San Juan Island in Washington. And I had applied to complete this project called Drifters, where I'm making about 1,000 plankton pieces and on these little paper key tags, and I hope to install them someplace at some point. But by the time I got there, I had been accepted to Big Ink, and since I have a full-time job, I thought, well, I have 2 full weeks in this beautiful studio. I'm going to ship my blocks out there and start carving and in Friday Harbor. So I worked on this huge humpback whale, and you can see it has a poem that runs through the body of the whale and then through the water.
And you said this was 40 something by 90?
40 by 90. Then I decided when I got home to make a hand pulled print and turn it into a triangular folded book. So you can see on the lower right, there's the little prototype for my book.
Yeah.
And on my living room floor, measuring all the triangles and drawing them out on the back of the sheet in this picture. And then this is
printed, or this is already printed, or this is before you printed, you drew the triangles?
This was already printed. So I needed a heavier paper for the fold. They were using just a really thin mess of paper at Big Ink, and they only gave me 2. So I bought a heavier paper, and I printed it on the floor by walking on it, which actually, I was really happy. It gave it this beautiful texture that the
Uh,
regular press prints didn't have.
yeah.
And then I folded it into this triangular book.
Do you only have one of these, or is it an edition?
I only have one. I intended to make two, and it was such a huge production that I never made. I was like, okay, that's it.
Yeah. And the blue, is that painted or is that also printed?
That's watercolor
Oh,
painted
wow. And where does this guy live?
on my bookshelf.
Oh,
But, you know, that's the problem. I was part of this Instagram with Yunshin Park. I asked her if I could be part of this share art. It's a 10-day
yeah.
thing to share old pieces. And
Yeah.
I realized that I still have all my old pieces. They're in my house. All right.
Okay.
So this is my studio, my home studio. And in the red box is the book that I'm going to share. And I'll probably scroll through it pretty quickly because it's just to get a sense of the book. We don't have to spend a ton of time on every slide, but
Yeah. So where you're sitting right now, I see your shelves behind you.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And then one thing I like to do is I like to take take old pieces from my drawers and reassemble them into a new piece. So I had boards that were from my Gules. I had a book that I made in Sean's class, actually, his additions class. And I had extra boards that I had cut incorrectly for my Gules book. So I pulled out old prints, I pulled out the old boards, and I decided to make it into something new. I had written a poem called Integumentary.
Oh.
And this is actually sewn. So this is the poem. And then
Handwrite this, or is it printed?
I hand wrote it, and then I stitched it onto the paper.
Oh.
So this is sewn. This is the back of it.
Oh, beautiful. Oh my.
I kind of like it. It reminds me of cuneiform.
Yeah, I love that. It's very Pam Palsworthy.
Then I had Kozo paper with these bird prints on it, which are actually from grad school, and I made it. I cut them down and reassembled them into this new book. Printed a little bit of letterpress at Ben Blunt's studio.
And Nancy is asking in the chat, did you make the paper in this book?
I made the paper at Columbia, and they were these great big tall scrolls that hung from the ceiling. And another one of those things that has been sitting around my studio, and I just decided to cut them all down, reuse them.
Make them into something new. I love that.
Yeah, and I had made the paper with the red threads in it, and I have sewing along the edge to sew the pages together.
Wow.
So I'll just kind of scroll through that just to show you. It's not every page, but gives you an idea.
That guy.
The birds were originally people. I had stories about people, but they've become something else.
I love the idea of taking old work and making it into something new and giving it a new life.
Yeah, I love doing that too. And then we get to ceramics. So this is actually the first sculptural piece that I made that has a book in it. All the gills in the back have this poem written on the gills.
And is this handmade paper that you made to fit that area?
I cut them down, and it's not handmade paper.
Oh, okay.
It's Lacta paper.
Lacta paper.
Lacta.
And did you handwrite the poem on there?
Yeah.
Okay, Valerie has a question in here. So what type of thread did you use for the edge of paper? I'm assuming, Valerie, you mean on the previous book? I think that question refers to the last book. So what kind of?
That's just sewing thread.
Just regular?
Yeah.
Yeah.
standard sewing thread, and I had a grid, and I'd draw out a grid, and I would pierce all the holes first, and then I'd play with the thread and the patterns.
Okay. And she said, yeah. So on the previous book.
Yeah.
Okay. That's really cool. And so let's go back to this. Do you have a kiln in your home studio? Where do
No.
you?
So I work at the Evanston pot shop, and then they were closed for about 3 months. So I started working with Joanna Kramer. She has her own studio, and she was doing these online wine women in mud while everyone was at home. And so I signed up for one of those. I couldn't make anything in clay for about 2 months, and I was going crazy because I don't know, I love to dig my hands in the dirt, and I've been wanting to do that for years. So that's why I started working in ceramics. I had worked in ceramics a lot when I was in junior high and high school, and then when I got to college, I dropped it because the first class I walked into, they said, oh, okay, we're not going to touch clay. We are just going to get into the chemistry of making glazes. And I said, forget it. So anyway, back to the story. Joanna was having her wine women in mud. You could go and pick up all of the supplies you needed in the clay and take it home and hand build at home. And then I signed up for her. It's like an open studio. I could go get more clay, and she'll fire it and glaze it.
So this was the first one that you made. When was this little guy made?
This was not the first one I made. This was the first sculptural piece, because the first thing I wanted to do, I just felt like throwing on a wheel. And so I worked on that for a while. More and more I started hand building, and everything was very utilitarian. I made all new plates and bowls for my kitchen and all kinds of things like that. And then this was the first one that was really non-functional.
So this is your sculptural book with clay as the binding, essentially.
Right. This is one from Joanna's studio. I actually have him in front of me. I can show you later, but she works with this really beautiful dark brown clay that I love. And so I made this at home, and then she just put a simple white glaze on it. I've just been telling her I want this one to have the white glaze or this one to be clear.
Yeah.
And so this one just has the white. And then this is another one I made with the dark clay. And then I used underglaze to get the white and the orange. And she just put a clear glaze on it. This is also a tray.
These are really stunning.
This is
Ooh la la.
another one with Joanna with the dark clay. And then these little handheld. I like making these little brush or chopstick rests. Again, I can show you some things I have on my table when this is done, if you want.
And then we're moving to some drawing.
Yeah, so all those dark clay pieces were things that I did at home during COVID.
Yeah.
And then I also worked on this project. This is, I was drawing coyotes. This was what I was working on when we were sent home from work. And I was doing all these drawings of coyotes, and I wasn't quite sure where I was going or how it was going to tie together. And then suddenly, when I was at home with my family, my quarantine buddies, I started feeling like it had more of a purpose. So I had started drawing hands on them. I wasn't quite sure why I was doing that either. It was just intuitive. And then, and suddenly it felt like, okay, this is my pack. So this was one of the first things I did when I was at home. And then simultaneously, I bound the book for the COVID journal. And these are some of the coyotes. I don't know if can you see the hands very well?
Yeah, I saw them better on the first one, and then on the right one, I see where the hand is. It's up in the upper left corner of the right one. And then on the left when it's down in the bottom corner.
Yeah, bottom right.
Reaching up. And what is the spine of that guy?
The spine is my mother's spine.
Wow.
So you see about 2/3 of the way down, there's a little flattened vertebra.
Yeah.
She fell and she broke her back, and her vertebra shattered and was
Oh,
pressing into her spinal cord. And I actually had her X-ray, and so this is her spine.
wow.
Yeah,
Wow. That's really incredible.
yeah, and considering the fact that she doesn't have a piece of her vertebra, she's doing remarkably well now.
That's great. Good. Oh,
Uh,
new lapping hands. Wow. Where are you finding the images of the wolves? The wolf.
these are, well, they're coyote, and actually the reason why I started drawing coyote is because they run through Evanston. We hear them really
Yeah.
often howling in our
Yeah.
neighborhood. And I went online for photo references.
Oh, wow.
And then the owl is the first piece where I have taken this text that I've been putting into my COVID journal, and I
Mhm.
put it on the stump that he's sitting on. It says social isolation. So he's kind of isolated from the pack.
Oh, wow. And he's right behind your head.
Yeah, he is. I put two of them on the wall.
Nice. There they are. And what kind of paper are those on?
They are on a handmade Indian paper that I bought when I was in India last time.
Okay.
Actually, no, it wasn't last time. It was 2015. I was there. I lived in India for about 5 months with my husband's family. And
Okay.
even though India is a hub of handmade paper making, they don't seem to love the handmade look. So it's really hard to find. And I finally found this paper at a craft fair, and I bought a big stack of it and brought it home.
Yeah, good. Okay, and now we're at your COVID journal, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
tell us about this.
So this is within a couple of weeks, I just felt like I needed something to just sort of express my feelings, and it's just to work things out during this time. And I again used materials I had in my home that I'd been wanting to use for a long time. I had this huge atlas that was given to me by Rhiannon in 2005, I think.
Oh,
And I finally, I had unbound it, and I finally decided to use this old atlas for the pages of this journal. And it's another oak cover from my Gules edition. And the first page, I started with a poem that was sent to me. There were these inspiration from a friend emails that were going around, where it was like a chain letter.
yeah.
And this is one that was sent to me, and it was from the 1918 flu pandemic, and it really just struck a chord with me. So I wrote it as the first page. And so April 4th is the first entry into this journal. And then for the rest of the journal, I skip around. I make the piece on the page of the map that seems appropriate, and I date everything. So it's not linear.
Right. So it's not in order or chronological. You're skipping around on the pages.
Yeah.
What?
In my presentation, I tried to be a little bit more linear, but in the book, it's not.
Okay. Meredith says in the chat, I loved this piece that went viral too. Don't be mad, but that one isn't really from the 1918 flu pandemic. Snopes proved it's contemporary. So.
Oh, really? Well, it was beautiful. I really thought it was beautiful.
It is. Well, either way, yeah, it's gorgeous.
That is really funny.
What is this? Beautiful.
So this is obviously Chicago. It's one of, I feel like I skipped a couple. Just a second. I did.
Oh.
All right. So this was the first drawing of the bat. Of course.
Yeah.
Wow. This is Chicago. And
Red blackbird.
Go ahead. Sorry.
The red-winged blackbirds.
Oh yeah, yeah. So we have a big batch of red-winged blackbirds in our yard, and every year our mail carrier stops delivering mail for about 2 weeks because she gets swooped and she's afraid of them.
Yeah, I've been swooped in on the lakefront by our birds here in Evanston are very possessive of their areas. So Nancy's asking, are you a birder?
No, I'm not a birder. I'm very interested in birds, but that's about as far as it goes.
Okay, so tell me about this drawing and this spread.
This one has dates and numbers of COVID cases and deaths. And so I just keep adding to this page for the local numbers.
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And I actually, my work is usually, I gravitate towards birds and sea creatures mainly. I really like I think I like the textures. I don't like drawing fur.
Okay.
So the coyotes were a bit of a departure for me.
Nice.
This is a page. My aunt, who's I think 91, was actually in a really horrible nursing home in Massachusetts where she got COVID, and luckily she had a low grade fever. So they tested her and she came back positive, and I thought that was the end, but
yeah,
it wasn't. She got through it. After that day, she had very, very few symptoms, almost nothing. And then she was finally tested and she didn't have it. But the numbers were unbelievable. There were 135 beds in the place and 118 people had COVID.
Oh my goodness.
And 49 people passed away. And then there were like 70 or 80 staff members who tested positive. She's the one on the right in that picture. That's my mother and her brother and sister.
Oh my goodness. That's really powerful.
Yeah, so I was keeping track of the numbers there for a little while. And then this is Manhattan, which is Manhattan's blacked out in the middle. And on this date, these were the numbers.
So Meredith says, what a horrific tale, and so amazing that she survived it. I also am really intrigued on this spread by the text and the way that you have not printed, because this isn't a print, of course you're drawing the text on there, but the way you have whited it, it's just so lovely, that difference of texture on that right hand side where the text is versus the map.
Yeah, I've become become addicted to making these text pieces, and it's purely geometric, and I'll think of a really simple phrase, and then I measure it all out. It's grids, and then I use this is my pencil sharpener. I use the base pencil sharpener to make every single curve.
Oh, wow.
Book. So it's kind of, once I've decided what to do, it's kind of meditative, which is nice because you don't have to be incredibly inspired. I come up with the idea of the day and then I just do it. Yeah.
That's really cool. Oh.
So then I started feeling like there were lots of positive stories coming out about during this time when everyone was at home, animals returning to areas where they weren't usually able to go, when there were freighters in shipping lanes, or animals wandering into cities, smog disappearing. And so I was really trying to focus on positive things.
Yeah. So Ben has dropped into the chat to say nice, and I'm assuming he's talking about the text and the style of text, just because I'm making assumptions based on Ben.
So this is a humpback returning to the shipping lanes in the Mediterranean off the coast of
Wow.
Spain.
Yeah. Wow. So as you're thinking about these pages, are you just sort of going through the pages and saying, oh, this is, New York, this is Antarctica, this is Florida or whatever, and figuring it out? Or do you have your idea beforehand, or is it kind of a mixture between the two?
It's purely intuitive. If I come up with an idea, I place it on the map in a place that seems to make sense. I don't know why sometimes this is not scrolling. It's not catching every page. So I'm just going to go back and show you
Yeah.
some pages. Oh yeah, in Italy, they sang from the windows. So this is on Italy, of course. I
Oh,
thought that was really beautiful.
yeah, that is a gorgeous design. I love that piece.
So that I thought that was a beautiful human response. And then over LA, clear blue skies.
Oh, so I love these, and I love that they're in one book, and I'm wondering what will happen with them in the future. And also Nancy says in the chat, why postage stamps on some? She's noticing postage stamps. Why did you add those?
I've been wanting to use postage stamps. I have this collection of random postage stamps, and like I said, this is all intuitive. This is just what I feel like doing on that particular day. This is a completely selfish piece. So
Yeah.
if I feel like a postage stamp, I'm going to put a postage stamp on there. This one's Puerto Rico. We all know about the hurricane in Puerto Rico. There were all of these animals, like I said, coming back into cities,
Yeah.
and smog lifting, and somehow this nature always wins made me feel like it can come off as negative, but it made me feel really positive. Like, even if humanity is wiped off this earth, the plants are going to grow over everything. There will be animals.
Yeah.
Somehow, even in the middle of something that felt very negative and very scary and very difficult, this made me feel positive. Like the world will go on, whether
Exactly.
we're here or not.
Yeah.
Every
Okay.
time I pause, it decides it wants to skip pages. Okay, so and this is the Sika deer that was found in the subway in Japan.
Wow.
They wandered into the subway.
I
And
love
then
that.
humpback again.
Yeah.
And I guess the orca whales are doing very well off the coast as well, without all of the noise pollution that is a problem, and all of the freighters and the shipping lanes off Vancouver Island.
Yeah.
And this was a quote that my son had actually written a couple of years ago. I'd had it up on my shelf behind me, but I just felt like putting it in.
Yeah. He's collaborating.
Yeah. And then this was about Iran. I'm drawing a blank now. Methanol. A
Oh.
lot of people died because they drank methanol.
Oh, wow.
So there are 500, no, let's see. Yeah, the numbers are there.
Yeah.
And it just was appalling to me. And so this is what I did on that day when I heard the news that people were dying because they thought that they could take methanol to kill the coronavirus.
Yeah.
This is smog lifts over Delhi.
Wow. And there's your ticket. Oh.
My ticket and my tour pass to all the heritage sites in Delhi.
This is quite lovely and terrifying at the same time. It's got this really duplicitous nature about it because, of course, it's just stunningly beautiful visually. And then, of course, we have this heartache that comes along with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and then of course, Black Lives Matters. Um, it's always been there, but we started having the, um,
Protests.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's stating the obvious. And I don't like to use quotes that are really common. I
Yeah.
don't I don't like to take quotes like Black Lives Matter and put it into my book. I always said I would never do any Trump art, but he does kind of wind his way into this a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So stating the obvious, but yes, all is not equal. It was what I was feeling that day, um, and then of course Black Tuesday. I just
Yeah.
blacked out a whole page,
Blackout.
and
Yeah.
Blackout Tuesday,
Yeah.
and it's I still have this feeling like this is an unfinished project, and I still have this feeling like I almost want to black out or paint over every page when I'm finished, and I don't think I'll have the guts. But uh, I am going to be adding a lot of elements of collaged bats to it. It's going to be kind of stuffed with extra pieces of paper eventually, but I
Yeah.
keep thinking that I almost want to just cover the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Okay. It is still here. Yeah.
Yeah. As we approach, a later date in our stay at home and everyone starts going out into the world and not being as careful and this is Trump.
Yeah. I like
Kung
this.
Flu.
Yeah.
After his Oklahoma
Rally.
debacle.
Yeah.
He Kung Flu asshole. And this one was personal. I had an attack of vertigo and thought I was having a heart attack and went to ER. So that was fun.
Oh my goodness.
And then, of course, I had been calling it the COVID journal all along. I didn't really want to call it the COVID journal, and it was becoming a lot of other things. So it became the beautiful horrific.
Mm.
And so this is bleed through on the spine from Blackout Tuesday, and they looked like butterflies. I felt like it became something beautiful, and
Yeah.
so I started drawing some black butterflies.
So Sarah says in the chat, I really like your lettering, Marty.
Thank you. And that's it for the slides.
Okay. So go ahead and exit your screen share and we'll have our last bunch of minutes of conversation. So I'm so touched by this. How many pages do you have in there that are? And then what's the next step after we go back to some semblance of normal? What's your plan for this book besides the plan of blacking out or painting over every page once you're done, which makes it more of a process piece? I think that's really interesting. But so what are you thinking with this one? Are you still using it primarily to work through things, or do you have a
I'm continuing with it because there are still a lot of blank pages, and I didn't even show you everything that I've drawn, although that's the bulk of it. And yeah, I'm just gonna keep going with it until it feels irrelevant. It'll morph, it'll turn into something else, I think, but for now it's just something that sits on my table and I keep going back to, and it just feels good to work in that really intuitive way.
Yeah, yeah. Do you, I didn't ask this before, but what is the size of this book? Because it seems like it's big to me in my brain.
It's 9 by 12.
It's 9 by 12. Wow.
So this is the cover.
Yeah, can you show us the side of it? Oh, yeah. That is really lovely in and of itself. I'm excited to see more pieces of it as you post them on Instagram and on and share them with us on Facebook. So we have about 10 more minutes left. Does anybody have any questions that they want to drop into the chat, or any more pieces of conversation that you want to add? Are you still working on the pack pieces? Do you have more drawings that you're doing, or are you just concentrating on COVID, the beautiful horrific, and on your pottery right now?
Yeah, I feel like the pack is done, and right now, I went through just a couple of things that derailed me a little bit, so I haven't been quite as prolific.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm still just working on the beautiful horrific, and then the pot shop is open again, so I started going there and throwing on the wheel.
Yeah, and you said earlier that when we were just starting to open up the waiting room, you were talking about how you've gone back to work. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so Monday and Tuesday I was in, and there aren't very many people there. They have, of course, the people who are cleaning and facilities, and people who are running, keeping the environment running, and security, but curators aren't even going back yet unless there's some absolutely necessary reason.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, anyone who can work from home is working from home. They have curators and graphics and HR, and everyone is still at home. But the conservators, they have to work on some of the artwork for exhibitions, and conservation technicians and installers, they're all in trying to get the galleries ready for the opening next Thursday. So
Yeah.
I've been back.
So are you going back, like, are you alternating days and spaces with other people? Do you have you're not back there full time
No,
at base? So yeah,
no.
how's it working?
So we determined that all 4 conservators, or actually there are 5 conservators, and I'm the only conservation technician, but I work in tandem with she's the conservator for matting and framing. And we decided that the 4 people who work in the lab and the 2 people who work in the frame shop or the prep shop could all work at once, but we haven't gone beyond 2 or 3 people in that space so far.
Yeah.
We've been alternating.
Socially distant.
Yeah,
Probably.
Monday. Yeah, sorry, I'm talking over you.
No. Okay.
So Monday is the first day I'll be working with my coworker to clean up the galleries and make sure everything is bright and shiny and ready for opening next Thursday.
So Marcy Carmack is asking what exhibit. So Marcy, Marty was talking earlier, she works at the Art Institute in the paper and drawings conservation lab there. So maybe explain that a little bit for the people who came in late, or for people who didn't understand what you do for a living.
Marcy's a friend of mine, so she knows what I do.
Oh, gotcha.
The Monet exhibit is going to be the first big one that opens in September, and so everyone's working on that. And I'm working on collection maintenance, which means everything that is given or bought in prints and drawings has to be prepared to go into the collection. We prepare everything into standard sizes. So I have to mat things in a standard size or unframe them often. Some things remain framed. But there's a backlog. There are like 300 or 400 pieces that need to be worked on before they can go into the collection. So I just started working on that.
Yeah.
And we have a Ray Johnson exhibition in the fall, in January. So that's going to be a big one for us.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on and a lot of catch up to do as well.
Yeah.
Well, Marty, I want to thank you so much for joining us today for your Quarantour. Thank you so much for joining us for this week's Quarantour with Mardy Sears. We so appreciate having artists like this come and have these conversations with us around art during COVID and around what they make and what they're doing with their lives. Thank you so much for supporting Artist Bookhouse. Please consider dropping a donation on our website if you'd like to support more of this programming. Thank you so much.